Hello, and welcome to this edition of the LDHR webinar series. I'm Karen Zando, and I have the privilege of being your host this morning. We are excited today as we highlight the final projects of four individuals who recently completed the LDHR Summer School. This summer school consisted of 34 individuals from 13 different countries, areas, regions around the world. They gathered in a learning environment that was specific to LDHR practitioners, and the sole focus and goal was to learn more about applied human resources. As part of this program, the participants were asked to develop a final presentation around an area of need related to their specific LDHR role. There were a wide variety of topics covered, and they all were excellent. Today, we've invited four of the individuals to share their presentations in this webinar. Alan, Bekah, Cory, and Nellie will each share their presentation. After all four of them have completed, we've allotted time for question and answer. So please, in the meantime, use the chat box to put in your comments or your questions. And as we get to the end of the seminar, we will get to as many of those as possible. So I have enabled the share screening for our participants. So our first speaker today will be Alan Tung. Alan and his wife, Jenny, have four children ranging in ages from 4 to 8. So we know they're quite busy. They live outside Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Alan gives leadership to the Senior Leadership Initiative in the United States and also serves on the Oneness and Diversity team. Today, he's going to share about LDHR conflict processes and oneness and diversity. Alan, go ahead and take over, please.
So thanks for the intro, Karen, and it's great to be with everyone. The LDHR Summer School was really great, and I really appreciated learning from leaders from all across the world and just getting to hear some of their context. So I chose to focus on LDHR, I'm quoting it, conflict processes and O&D. And the reason is because, I think we've seen it a little bit, obviously, in the last few weeks, but, even over the last few years, there's a growing awareness of differing cultural values and expectations. And I think here in the US, for sure, there's a hoped for increase in staff diversity in the United States. And I believe currently, demographically, the US is, I think, like 30-some% ethnic minority, yet our staff family is only about, I think numbers range depending on how you count it, but around 15%, 15 to 18% ethnic minority. In terms of the HR realm, our HR processes need to be responsive to this new awareness. And that's something that, as I've been a part of the Oneness and Diversity team, that we're also starting to engage in. And we've also seen some, other things that Crew has done in this realm, including the establishment of the Oneness and Diversity Department, which is a really big step forward. And so the key question that I was asking as I was thinking about this project was, how and when should Oneness and Diversity engage with its expertise in terms of our conflict processes? And the reason I was asking this is, as we've had some of these conversations, what I realized was it's, a lot of our HR processes in this area have kind of developed organically over time. And at least for me, stepping into some of the roles and responsibilities I had, it wasn't very clear what all the processes were and what the procedures were, nor was it clear where O&D then could step in appropriately. And so for my project, I focused on how could I organize some of these things so that it would be easier to start working with O&D in these areas. And so I kind of organized it into two main chunks. One is informal HR engagement, and the second is formal HR engagement. So for the first part, informal HR engagement, and again, these might not be exhaustive, but these are kind of the things that I was able to surface, consists kind of two main areas in terms of conflict processes. So one is kind of informal conflict, like perhaps two people not agreeing on something, on a team. A second is like informal discipline, in the sense of like maybe a team leader is engaged with a team member and asking for them to make some changes or related to behavior or actions or things like that. And in terms of our HR engagement, our principle is generally that we work it out at the local level according to biblical and conflict resolution principles, right? Which is great, and I think generally speaking, people are pretty aware of this. As part of the process, the parties involved may seek HR advice, like they might contact their HR leader and ask for some help or some processing time there. And when an HR leader is contacted in that way, the HR leader should be aware of and pay attention to the cultural dynamics. So that's like one of the things that I think as HR we need to continue to grow in. And there's also now, with the establishment of O&D, there's an opportunity for HR to seek O&D or offer them as an informal resource in these kinds of situations, right? So that's an informal HR engagement. So next, there's formal HR engagements. And so there's several different kinds that we have. And again, these are not necessarily the official names. Actually, some of what's confusing is different people call these processes different things sometimes. But this is how I was describing them, at least for my presentation. And so the 5 that I found, one was unresolved conflict. And so if an informal conflict resolution process wasn't sufficient to resolve the conflict, sometimes it'll become a formal kind of intersection with HR as an unresolved conflict. A second is a disciplinary action involving employment. So if there's a supervisor that, for whatever reason, decides like, I want to recommend that this staff person should not continue on as staff, that kind of disciplinary action automatically involves HR. That's not a unilateral decision that they can make. The next one is a discipline dispute resolution. And so that's when discipline is being applied and the person who is being disciplined disputes that, whether it's accuracy that, discipline is necessary, or, it may be a dispute in terms of like what level of discipline is appropriate. Fourth type is harassment. This is something that, there's been a decent amount of work that's gone into this area in terms of our staff dignity training, but that can also be a formal HR complaint. And then lastly is a whistleblower complaint, which again is a type of HR complaint where a staff member may say there's somebody in leadership above me that, engaging in some kind of inappropriate behavior. And so right now, a couple other thoughts. So these could be filed at the ministry level or national level. Certain ministries are small enough that sometimes it automatically goes to the national level, but other ministries like say campus or Jesus Film have a large enough ministry that often it's filed at the ministry level. And there are established policy procedures for each type of these engagements. And when one of these formal engagements is initiated, it results in an investigation, right? So we have a number of investigators. Sometimes it's official. Some of them are like, kind of official. And they will always work in a pair and do research or look into the complaint, and there's certain, best practices and norms related to that. Some of the things that I think we need to continue to consider is that investigators should pay attention to cultural dynamics. All investigators should. And, one of the desires is that there would be investigators of differing backgrounds. Currently, most of the investigators come from a white cultural perspective. And then investigators should ask for support from O&D consultants when appropriate. And so a few path steps in terms of how we could get to where we need to go in this area. So one is that ministry HR reps need to be trained in cultural competence and unconscious bias. Secondly, investigators need to be trained in cultural competence and unconscious bias. And then a few other ones. So one is that it would be helpful to formalize the training for investigators. Currently, it's kind of an informal training right now, but if we're seeking to, increase our pool of investigators, especially that are more diverse, having a formal training where it's clear, like everybody's expectations and norms are laid out clearly would be helpful. Next step, as that's formalized, it would be great to have 5 new non-white investigators that are trained to handle that. And then on the O&D side, as consultants, there's some training necessary for how they can help investigations from a consultant role. And so that's the things that I've discovered kind of in my process of looking into this area. So thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Thanks for the work you did on this and for bringing to our attention some of the different dynamics that perhaps we haven't thought about in the past. So we appreciate that. Well, next up is Bekah Phillips. Bekah is going to share with us about changing our posture towards international interns in East Asia. Bekah is from Kentucky. She's been serving with the organization in East Asia since 2012. She served on college campus teams for a number of years until this past year when she transitioned and began to serve as the International Intern Director for her zone in East Asia. So Bekah, I know I found your initial presentation quite intriguing, so I'm looking forward to you sharing it with everyone else.
Like Karen said, my topic is on changing our posture towards international interns in East Asia. I'll just briefly summarize the background of the origin of my topic. And it began with this quote from the book HR for the Heart about encouraging innovation and not punishing risk-taking. And when I first read this, I started thinking about our area and if we have a culture that makes room for innovation, or do we punish risk-taking, which, to be fair, is a more challenging topic in a closed country, in a secure country. So because of my role, interns are kind of always on my mind. And because of their typical age and life stage, I think interns can be some of our greatest innovators and risk takers. So my original questions morphed into new ones about how do we interact with our interns? Do they have room to take chances? And do they have a voice in our ministry? And these questions developed into my project theme. I wanted to investigate our overall posture towards international interns in East Asia. As I started asking around, someone shared this quote with me. Interns are like puppies. They're messy, but they're fun to play with. And honestly, it hit close to home. Not only could I relate to this line of thinking, it also seemed to capture our overall posture towards our international interns. And it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. I was wondering if our view of interns is limited to this. Are they cute but messy? So I started to ask around. I did a quick survey of some of our international staff to see if I could discover some of our deeper opinions towards our interns. So I asked a handful of East Asia staff serving on different teams in various zones, what are some of the first things that come to mind when they think about working with interns? And while the things listed on the slide don't represent everything said, they are some of the themes and ideas that were repeated in their responses. Several mentioned the need for hand-holding or babysitting. Most mentioned their immaturity. And many mentioned that they require a lot of work or they tend to create more work. On the benefit side, almost everyone said the same things across the board. They're energetic, fun, and hard workers. They were even specifically referred to as workhorses and worker bees. I don't know about you, but if I were an intern, I wouldn't want this to be the way my coworkers and leaders view me. I'd wonder if I was worth as much trouble as I bring to my team in the ministry. So I think we need to develop a more balanced and healthier perspective towards our interns. One of compassion, one that sees and values them as they are and has vision for their potential and their future. One that focuses on developing them and even sees their development as part of the fruit of our that they bring to our movements. We want them to feel known, needed, and like they have a future. This isn't an issue unique to us. A quick internet search showed me that this is an issue that many other companies are discussing. I really like the second quote here, because even if our interns may only be with us temporarily, we shouldn't treat them as if they're passing through. We should take the time and energy to invest in them. So after looking into this topic, I developed a new goal. I would like East Asia staff to do our best to transform our perspective of our interns, shifting our attitude from annoyed to hopeful. Instead of using language of hand-holding or babysitting, using the language of teaching, training, and developing. And changing our expectation of them from being clueless, energetic, fun, hard workers to sent young laborers that we've been entrusted with that will grow in skill, knowledge, and maturity as we faithfully walk alongside them. I think making changes to these 3 areas could change not only us as leaders and coworkers, but also has the potential to create more room for our interns to have a voice, to grow, and to thrive in new ways. Really, I need to investigate a little more before I create an action plan for change. I want to talk with more of our interns, current and previous, and see how they feel they've been treated and viewed. I want to explore ways that we can make room for innovation and risk-taking. My most important next step is probably shifting my own attitudes, language, and expectations of our interns. I want to speak well of them and also have a balanced view that honors them well. So coming back to the puppy analogy, we don't get puppies because of the mess they make. We get a puppy because of the long-term relationship we'll have with them and what they will become. Nobody wants a puppy to continue as a puppy their whole lives, and no one expects them to. We expect them to grow, to be trained and developed into man's best friend. So the puppy analogy isn't incorrect. I think it's just a little short-sighted and incomplete. I want us to have a culture in East Asia where we love and respect our interns as they are, while we seek to invest in their development, no matter where life takes them. Thank you.
Thank you, Bekah. I really do appreciate the humility of your heart as you looked into that and what you uncovered, and just some of the ways that you're challenging us to think forward. So thank you. We really appreciate that. Our third presenter is Cory Terrell, and his subject is, does non-monetary compensation really work? It's an important one for our organization, isn't it? Cory is from Louisiana, and he served in East Asia since 2010. He also served on the campus ministries there for years, but has been involved in the last few years in LDHR. He currently serves as the Zone LDHR Director for East Asia. So Cory, I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this.
Yeah, thank you, Karen. I appreciate that. Yeah, so does non-monetary compensation really work? In our organization, we do, our most of our staff are supported staff, and because of this, we have a salary structure that's decided for us. Most our hiring staff aren't one that's worked towards, or a goal that's achieved. It's based on need, and so when we look towards compensation, we come from a viewpoint of non-monetary compensation as we grow as staff. And so I took a quote from HR from the Heart, one of the textbooks from our class, and ran with it. So install compensation programs that reward preferred behaviors is what the author said. And so when I read this, I thought of a few questions. How do we reward or provide positive, desirable incentives for staff that complete the staff development cycle each year? I thought of, how do we recognize that long-term staff member that has no desire to lead, but does an amazing job day to day? And how do we truly show appreciation to those that never need our time as LDHR representatives? These people are, yeah, just a few that kind of represent the whole. And so as we move forward, I started doing some research outside of our organization, and a lot of the corporate world refers to outside LDHR organizations. And so Randstad is a Dutch multinational human resource consulting firm that specializes on placement of temporary and permanent jobs. And so each year, this organization does research on what employees desire out of an organization. And the top 2 motivators for employees were of course, job security and competitive salary packages. 2 things that are just not at the top of the list that we can provide in our organization. We can definitely look at job security as a factor, but a competitive salary package is not something that we can offer in our organization. And so looking towards non-monetary compensation, we look, quote from Randstad, rewards are desired as a way to show your staff appreciation for their hard work. And whilst extra money is often cited as motivators for employees, it's often the intangibles, non-monetary rewards, which have the most impact on staff morale. Regardless of the benefits you offer to staff, seek to make your workplace an atmosphere where hard work is recognized and rewarded on a regular basis. To me, this is simple and clear. regardless of the benefits that we offer within our organization, make our workplace an atmosphere that encourages recognition and rewarding of that behavior. And so I also conducted a staff survey. And the first question I asked was, where do you find incentives in your job to strive towards excellence or organizational gain? And these were a few of the results that I got. Of course, there were the spiritual sides of our work. Serving Jesus and bringing glory to God brings that intrinsic value. Camaraderie and teamwork and a sense of accomplishment, witnessing salvations and seeing lives changed each day. And then there were the other sides that were, personal growth and development, role promotions and job experience. These were the things that really encouraged people towards moving forward in their jobs. But I think the one that sticks out to me is words of affirmation, especially from leaders. These are things that meant a lot to people. And so the next question I asked was, what non-monetary perk or incentive would you like to see in our organization that can motivate our staff in their careers as missionaries? And so a lot of these were just great recommendations: certification of accomplishments for trainings and development, publicly accredited certifications that they could use, and maybe outside of our organization one day, if the Lord calls them to leave our organization, that their work would be taken with them. Of course, additional paid leave, having birthdays off, and a few others. And so there were great recommendations that we can run off of that we're hearing feedback from our staff. So Randstad, what did they have to say about this? Here are other excellent non-monetary incentives that you can use to motivate and retain top talent. Creating monthly theme days to boost morale, rewards specific to personal interest. And so like this could be a gym membership for people who are active in gyms, or maybe like a gift of some sort. Offer time out of normal work commitments to work on projects which your staff may be passionate about, but are not necessarily related to their core business. And so just something that's completely outside of their ministry that maybe they're passionate about, and allowing work time to go towards that. And then I really enjoyed this last one: monthly and quarterly awards, events that showcase effort to show staff that they continually excelled in their field. And so this one, just providing a platform for people to encourage and give feedback to each other. In HR from the Heart, the author lists the top 25 best companies. What was those organizations successful in moving towards their employees? And this was the list that she compiled. They're always the ones that demonstrate through word and deed that each individual employee is highly and equally valued. And another one that I really enjoyed was provide their employees with significant opportunities to develop, grow, learn, both professionally and personally, and recognize that quality of life issues for their employees are important components of the business agenda. And for us and our organization, I think we do a really good job, but we definitely have room to grow. And so when I consider what I can do moving forward, that I could be a voice of encouragement for and towards our staff. I could foster a culture of praise amongst our staff by creating opportunities to give feedback privately, locally, and publicly. One suggestion that I heard in my survey was that at one point in our national conference that we have every other year, there was a place for people to basically recommend to other people, or recommend other people for awards of significance where they somehow touched their life in some way, and just allowed for that to be done in a public way. And I think that was a great thing that could be implemented. Continue to seek incentives and cultivate staff involvement, and to improve possible incentive or implement possible incentive from staff feedback to empower creativity. And so I think we do have a road ahead of us that we can continue to foster these non-monetary incentives, but I think we're heading in the right direction. Thank you.
Thank you, Cory. I really appreciate the questions you ask, as well as the research and the thought you put into this project. And some of the suggestions that you have made, I think, are some that hopefully will be, put into action. And I think maybe it'll spark some thought for other ideas that may come up. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Well, last but certainly not least, we have Nellie Solis. Nellie is a first-generation Puerto Rican American, and she's the oldest of 3 sisters. She has a passion for young people, for human resources, and the legal field. Probably a little known fact is that Nellie worked in the legal field for 15 years before joining our organization. She currently serves with Destino and is the HR director for Puerto Rico as part of the US LDHR team. Her topic today is Crew Puerto Rico LDHR Plan. So Nellie, take it away.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Karen. Thank you to all of the facilitators in the LDHR summer class. It was great. I had a wonderful time. I learned so much. And so now I want to take you on a trip. So let's fly down to Puerto Rico for the LDHR plan that I have created. And so I spoke with the National Director of Puerto Rico. His name is Dr. Bob. And I looked over their strategic plan and used all of the values of that strategic plan. And as you can see here, we have the regular values as everybody. But the first one I want to point out is that in there is family. And so family is really important and is a high value in the Puerto Rican culture. And I shared that when I first came on staff the first time around, I actually had my mom, who is now deceased, come and join, and my sister, my younger sister, in my commissioning ceremony. And so that was so important, not only important for my mom to be there, but also for my sister who was there as well too. And so it was really great, a great high value for me to have my mom be present as part of the commissioning ceremony. And so as we read through the book, which I really love, the HR from the Heart, I used the 4 major points that we talked about in our summer class. And so I want to be able to lead Puerto Rico with the passion and with progress to see it be into the full ministry that it could be, following and leading with a passionate heart in order to live out my calling as a full-time missionary. And the progress is to start building a solid foundation to lead in all things HR. And as the author of HR from the Heart wrote, Libby, she said, HR is also a huge, some would say, sacred responsibility. We are entrusted with the lives of people. And that is so true, that we are entrusted with those lives and being able to care for them. And so I want to bring that value, as I mentioned earlier. And in order to bring the value as the HR director for Puerto Rico, it begins with establishing trust, creating and developing relationships personally with the teams and with the volunteers. We have quite a number of volunteers in Puerto Rico, I have just found out. And so I want to be able to establish a seat at the table. The executive team right now, it's just about 5 of us. And so being strategic in HR means bringing together all things people in such a way that we can answer the question, how is our staff performing and what impact does that have on the disciples and the community? And kind of like what Cory was saying, how can we gather that staff, keep them, and reward them? And, you know, it's messy, it can be messy, but we know that we can all work together to fulfill that great commission and be loving and be able to, as HR, shape the culture. And so we can drive culture change. And one of the ways that we can do that is by Zoom. I did my research on Zoom and how they shape their HR culture there. And so one of their top values is happiness. And that is an important value, to create an environment for each staff to be happy. And then the caring. We want to care about our staff, and we want to disciple, and we want to build a community. We want to not just come in and take over, but we want to care about them and be with them wherever they may be. And we want to give back to the community. We want to develop community-minded staff so that they can give to other organizations as well as volunteer within our communities. And we want to have that open door. We want to encourage them to think about what makes them happy, because a happy worker produces. So they can bring their best self to work. And we want them to grow. We want to promote staff to grow and to develop. And so, and as I look into the future of what Puerto Rico HR may look like, I want to be able to launch and develop a solid functioning HR team to help move the culture of Puerto Rico and the movement there forward. I want to develop an action plan to enhance the culture of the ministry. I want to be able to equip, train, develop staff, disciples, and volunteers to fulfill that great commission. And of course, because I'm a Latina, I want to celebrate. I want to celebrate every area, not only with our staff, but with our volunteers, with our disciplers, and make it a happy place to live at, even though it is a beautiful island. So thank you so much for listening. Thank you for traveling to Puerto Rico with me, and back to Karen.
Thank you, Nellie. Thank you for taking us with you to Puerto Rico. I need to get there someday for real. I totally appreciate your passion that has come out, your passion for people, your passion for Puerto Rico. And I'm going to be excited to see how the Lord uses you in the years to come. Well, Alan, Bekah, Cory, and Nellie, y'all did a great job of sharing your work with us. And I wanted to open it up to questions. And I was looking at the chat box. I had not seen any pop up yet. So, oh, maybe there's one there. Oh, that's a well done. Yes, you're getting a lot of well dones and acknowledgements. So if you have a question, I'll tell you what, there's just a few of us on here. If you can go verbal, but keep it succinct and just ask a question for sake of time, I would love for you to just address a question to any or all of our presenters today.
I have a question for Alan. I was thinking about your ideas of really pulling in the Oneness and Diversity team more often as a resource. And I mean, practically, how would somebody do that? Can you just give me sort of the basic steps? I've got maybe a conversation going on with some people, and I'd really like the Oneness and Diversity wisdom for that. How would I go about accessing?
That's a great question. Probably the easiest way. So each ministry has a Oneness and Diversity representative. And so, like, let's say, something came up in AIA and there's HR is working with them and they wanted to engage with Oneness and Diversity. In this case, it would be Alethea Lamberson. And so, Alethea could be somebody they could reach out to. And so, yeah, I would say that's the way to go. For national HR, the two reps are me and then Rebecca Kennard. And so, either of us you could reach out to. And O&D has done some training in terms of like, I think we still need to do more, but we've done some training in terms of like, if we are asked about, a case, and consulting at that level, like what are some of the things that we need to be keeping in mind in terms of, being, an unbiased view, like that we're not an advocate, that we're representing both the organization and the people that are involved in the case. And so, yeah, I think that would be the way to go, is through the indirect team reps. I think that's the purpose of that, or one of the purposes of that team. So.
Do you all happen to have a group on Workplace or anything like that? Because I'm thinking, for me, I'm in the US, but I also have a lot of global scope.
Sure.
And so I don't know, maybe we have, and I don't even know, a Oneness and Diversity rep, like for our group. No. So is there any other place I could kind of find you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I actually don't know about the Workplace. I'm not super familiar with Workplace, but that's a great question and something that I can bring up to the team about, because I've used it for other things like ministry card questions and things, and it has been really convenient source info. So, thanks, Terry. Yeah.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for that question. So there's a question in the chat box from Melissa, and this is for any of the presenters. Were there any surprises in your research? Anything that you were not expecting to find?
Well, I can say that I knew better, but I didn't. So it was a surprise to me to kind of find out I have a lot of work to do in Puerto Rico, and what have I gotten myself into? Where's Sherry Penman? Can she pull me out of this? And so, but then again, I was pleasantly surprised as well, on a positive note, that my prayer since 1999, when I was hired as a paid staff at headquarters, was, Lord, why isn't there a bigger presence in Puerto Rico? And so after praying for so long, here God has opened such a door for me to be part of what is going to happen, and how God is raising up such a great number of workers, of staff, of volunteers, and to see God answer my prayer. Yeah, I would have wanted him to answer it, like in the first year that I was praying for this, but this is such the time. And of course, it's always about what God does and what God is doing and his perfect timing. And it really is his perfect timing. And so what a beautiful way to see God moving when he wants to move, and then to just have me be part of that. I did not want to be part of this, but yay to God for how he has worked and what he is doing in Puerto Rico. So those were two surprises that I found in my work.
Oh, thanks, Nellie. What about the others? Surprises that you found as you did your research?
One surprise that I had was how many people thought non-monetary compensation was unnecessary, or felt like it wasn't a high value that they should have. And so like that all of our non-monetary compensation should come from satisfaction from serving the Lord. And so I did hear that a couple times and was very surprised.
Thanks, Cory. Bekah or Alan, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I think my topic is really where I got surprised. I thought I was going to look into like innovation and our culture around innovation. And I was surprised by how quickly I uncovered this view towards interns as a whole that felt like a bigger issue before we approached the innovation, and pretty connected. So I think I was just surprised but Anna found it in myself too. It was just kind of uncovering it. It came up pretty quickly. So that was my.
I think for me, it was actually, the surprise was what kind of triggered my project, in the sense that as I started working with O&D and LDHR and trying to connect some of those hoses, that it was difficult to communicate to O&D like the expectations, or even like, just clarity of language, and what all the different kind of realms of processes were, so that was, I think, the surprise. I think in my head, like, those things were very clear, and then as we started to like try to communicate those things, it was like, oh, this, at least for my experience, it's like it was very difficult to communicate those things in a way that made sense to the O&D team. So
So Alan, kind of a follow-up question on the O&D side that Bill asked is, how hopeful are you of actually finding the 5 people of color to be part of the team?
Yeah, I would say it's challenging. So I think that there's definitely motivation, both in terms of like organizationally, and I think even with the Oneness and Diversity team, it's something that we've been talking about. I think our challenge is capacity. That a lot of the people that I think we would think of like, hey, this could be a good candidate to help out in this area, that they're also already like pretty stretched thin in a lot of other responsibilities, organization. So.
Yeah.
It's also not a place where we have a lot of capacity anyway. Like
Sure.
There's a limited number of investigators, and on the HR side, just the capacity to do those things is also somewhat limited. So it makes it a double,
Right.
when you think about getting people of color into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Andrea, why don't you go ahead and ask your question that you put in the chat box?
Oh, it was a kind of follow-up to Alan also. How widespread would you say like the diversity, the training on cultural differences has become in the US?
I think a lot of the general, like big picture work has been done pretty well, you know, whether through the crew conferences or just kind of our focus in this area. I think we're at the stage where it requires more focus now, because a lot of the things on the HR level can tend to be more subtle, right? Because it might be communication styles, it might be, you know, leadership styles, different responses to authority, different expectations in terms of, you know, conflict resolution. And those things are all like, some of it's experience, some of it's exposure, but you know, why something may or may not make sense to a person may be different than for someone else, right? And so that's where it, you know, there's I think a decent amount of work left to do. We have been using the intercultural development inventory more as an organization. I think that's been helpful in terms of, I think, kind of at least engaging on two questions, right? So one is, where am I, like, am I culturally competent, right? Like how do I know if I am or I'm not? And then the second is, it does have, as part of the assessment, a development plan that you can walk through to help kind of give you some tracks to run on in growing in this area. Yeah, I think we have, yeah, again, I think motivation and I think, you know, alignment and desire and those kinds of things are definitely there. But, you know, I think it takes work to like learn a lot of these, I think, the differences in terms of the more subtle things. So.
That's all right. I was watching the clock and wanted to honor time. We've already gone over because of some of the glitches. But for our four presenters, Bekah, Cory, Nellie, Alan, I want to give you an opportunity if there's like one last thing you'd like to say before we sign off.
Yeah, I think Nellie kind of hit the nail on the head. The LDHR Summer School was really encouraging and a great platform for us to continue our education and learning in LDHR. And yeah, even the projects of the presentations were really helpful and a great opportunity to kind of hone in on one specific aspect of our job and where we can improve. Thank you.
Thank you, Cory.
Yeah, it was really great for me too. I really loved Libby, HR from the Heart, and I'm going to stalk her and want to meet her in person someday because I just felt so connected with her because I like to lead that way too from my heart. And so, and I just publicly want to say thank you to all of you facilitators for doing this. You made our class interesting, interactive. I felt really connected with everybody, even though we were all from so many different parts of the world. And wow, to this Puerto Rican woman, what an honor and a privilege to be able to serve with so many people who are looking forward to seeing everybody knows somebody who truly follows Jesus. So I am honored and privileged and humbled, and really look forward to what God will continue to do in and through each and every one of us. So thank you.
Yeah, I would echo kind of what Cory was saying and Nellie was saying, is just the opportunity, I think, with summer school was neat. And I think it's not often that you have the opportunity to work on a project and get so much like feedback so quickly, which is, I found to be really helpful. And, you know, obviously you can ask for it, but kind of having it built into the rhythm was nice. And so, yeah, you know, I think that aspect of the formal training and development, I think, was really helpful.
Yeah, same here. I think the summer school was great. I kept telling my teammates that it was a highlight of my week for the last several weeks. So, really appreciate you guys and giving us this opportunity.
Well, to Bekah, Cory, Nellie, and Alan, we are thankful you were part of summer school. You helped make it successful. And I so appreciate you willing to take the time today to present for a second time your projects. The diversity of topics and your depth of understanding and suggestions that you've made for us are very helpful and give all of us some things to think about and to work on. So thank you. Thanks for all of you who've attended today. Please stay tuned for the next webinar that will be coming up in about 2 months. If you have suggestions for what you might like us to cover in a webinar, please feel free to send them to me and we will consider them. So thank you all. Have a great day.